Hi everybody, Matthew Turnage here. Well, it's time for another Beatles album review, and today we're going to talk about their fourth UK album, Beatles For Sale. Beatles For Sale was released in December 1964 in the UK. It went to number one on the record retailer chart, where it spent 7 weeks at the top, and also went to number one on Melody Maker, and it spent 9 weeks there, and hit number one also on the NME and the BBC charts. It was released at the height of Beatlemania and was a huge hit, big seller. It sold 715,000 copies its first week of release in the UK. Although over the years it's been come to be regarded as one of their lesser albums. I think it has over time been a bit underrated. I think I underrated it when I first heard it, but it's grown on me over the years. I think part of the reason why it's been viewed that way is its relation to the albums preceding and succeeding it. The first two Beatles albums followed the formula of having 8 original songs and 6 cover songs. Then A Hard Day's Night, we get all original songs. All 13 tracks were Lennon McCartney originals. And so with Beatles For Sale, in a way, it may seem like a step backwards because we're back to having 8 original tracks and 6 cover songs. And then with the next album, Help, back to being almost all original songs. But it is a really good album. The original material shows some growth from the band. It's well designed too. One of the things that the Beatles came to really enjoy later in their career and carried into the solo career is minimizing the text on the album. Of course, you think of an album like Abbey Road, where it's just a photograph with no text at all. Albums like Revolver and Rubber Soul, where they didn't put the name Beatles on the front cover. This album does say Beatles For Sale there, but the text is very small and with the logos. And so if you're looking at it from a distance, it's not really even noticeable. Really what you see is the photograph of the 4 people. And at this point, they're famous enough that everybody's going to know who that is. It's a great photo on the back cover too, which would be used in the US for the early Beatles album. And that photography, by the way, is by Robert Freeman, whose thumb is this orange blotch here in the bottom of the album cover. So let's dive into the tracks. The album kicks off with a John Lennon song, No Reply. And this song is a bit downbeat, really, when you think about it, for an album opener. It's got lines like, I tried to telephone, you said you were not home, that's a lie. You know, John is being stood up by this girl. He's trying to reach her, and he gets no reply. I really love sort of the more low-key opening to this song, how it kicks off the album. It gives it a very different feel when you think of something like, you know, A Hard Day's Night, kicking off with the title track, Please Please Me, beginning with I Saw Her Standing There. You know, these are, you know, more kind of up-tempo rockers. This gives the album a very different feel starting it this way, and also gives us a little bit of a different view into the Beatles. You know, this is not a happy song, and you look at the album cover, and they don't really look like happy people. You know, the Beatles are getting burned out at this point, and they're also growing up a little bit, and they're getting a bit of a different perspective. And while I think the full maturity would come a little bit later, they are getting away from just the straight I love you and you love me kind of songs, the happier songs. There's always been, in those types of pop songs, you've always had a tradition of songs where you've had love lost or broken hearts. So that's not necessarily a new approach to have some more lyrical themes like that, but it is a little bit of a shift for the Beatles. So No Reply is an absolutely great song. Musically, it builds up well. I love where he sings the line, I nearly died, how it builds up there. And just a tremendous album opener, and one of John's best songs, I think, up to this point. The next track is I'm a Loser, another John song with another sort of a downbeat lyrical quality, although musically it's much more upbeat and everything. Sort of that same contrast that we get in a song like Help. It's got a sort of a country flavor to the music. It's nice and bounces along really well. And I love how John sings it. It's got a great vocal line and how he, is like is singing up here, and then at the end of the line he drops way down low, and I love that that effect. Another John harmonica solo, which by this point was starting to become less and less of a thing. And it's got a great walking bass line in the chorus of the song. It's a tremendous song, a great 1-2 punch to kick off the album with some songs that are a bit more downbeat lyrically, but while the first song, No Reply, is a bit more subdued musically, I'm a Loser has, like I said, a nice bounce and a nice country swing to it, and kind of picks up the musical feeling a little bit, even if the lyrics are still a little more down. Third track is Babies in Black, and again, another lyrically down song. This is a bit more kind of bluesy in approach, and it's got great harmonies throughout it. You know, like when they're singing, I think of her, but she thinks only of him. Those lines again. That it's sort of a longing. It's a desiring someone that you can't have. So in that sense, it's sort of similar. You kind of wonder almost if it's the same person in No Reply. That girl is not answering the phone because she's with someone else, and then here, Babies in Black. I'm thinking of her, but she's thinking only of him. It's another desire for someone who's involved with somebody else. So kind of wanting what you can't have. So after these three kind of broken-hearted type lyrics to kick off the album, now we're going to get into the covers, and it's going to be straight on rock and roll that the Beatles are a bit more known for at this point, perhaps, and they bring in a cover of Chuck Berry's rock and roll music. And it's a great Chuck Berry song, and the Beatles really do it justice with a great cover here. It sort of reminds me a little bit of Twist and Shout in terms of John's vocal approach at times. He really goes for it with his shouts and gets a nice growl happening there a few times, particularly if you think about the verse where it ends, so keep a rockin' that piano, and then he goes back into the chorus, so give him some of that rock and roll music. The tone on his voice is really hitting that, really hitting that Twist and Shout type vocal and really letting it go. Great rock and roll vocal from John. Overall, I probably still prefer the Chuck Berry original, but this is very close. They do a great job with this cover. Next up is I'll Follow the Sun, which is our first Paul song on the album. And it's a very early song from Paul. It was written when he was around 15 or 16, I think. So, late 50s. And it's got some very introspective kind of lyrics, I think. He would go much deeper later. This is a young man writing the song, but I do like lines like, one day you'll find that I've gone, but tomorrow may rain, so I'll follow the sun. So, there is a little bit of a darker tone kind of matching with what we've had with John's originals, but there's that underlying sense of optimism, where Paul's saying, tomorrow may rain, may not be good times ahead, but I'll follow the sun. I'm going to look for something better. So I really like that song a lot. And it's another great Paul melody, and it's amazing to think how young he was when he wrote that song, because the melody is really catchy. It shows what a gift he's always had for that. Next up is Mr. Moonlight, and of course another cover song, and one that has historically been regarded as one of fandom's least favorite Beatles songs. I don't think it's terrible, but I'll never skip it or anything listening to the album. But yeah, it's not a favorite of mine. It's I'll say this: I really admire how John really commits to the song vocally. He really goes for it. And I like that little sort of that drum hit. It almost sounds like a timpani, but I think it may be some sort of a Indian drum or something, where that big doom, that hits throughout the song. That's kind of nice, but it's not a great song. And other than just, wanting to hear John belt it out, there's really not a lot to recommend about that track, I don't think. But we close up with another cover, and this time it's Paul getting his Little Richard voice out with a cover of a medley of Kansas City and Hey, 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 Hey. And it's a great rockin' tune. It's kind of interesting that to get the real Beatles rockers to this point, we've had to go with the cover songs with Chuck Berry and now Little Richard to give us a little Beatles rock and roll on this album on the first side. But it's a great way to close out the album. Paul really belts it out. It's got a lot of energy, and it always worked great live too. So it was a really fun track and one of my favorites of the covers on the album. Side two, we kick off with a Beatles original, and then it's John again with a song that's a bit more in line with their earlier style, the early Beatles hits we think of on those first three albums, and that's 8 Days a Week. It's a great pop song with a great melody that really bounces along. Love the hand claps throughout. It's got another one of those walking bass lines from Paul. It's so catchy and so infectious. Kind of a shame it wasn't released as a single in the UK. It could have been a big hit there, just like it was when it was released as a single in the US. But it came down to it during the recording for the album. They had these 14 songs, plus they had I Feel Fine and Yes It Is, and those two tracks got chosen for the single. They decided I Feel Fine would be a better single than 8 Days a Week. It was between those two songs. Fortunately, America was able to get them both as a single, and 8 Days a Week was a #1 hit over here in early 1965. Next track is another cover, and I really like all the covers, perhaps except for Mr. Moonlight on this album. But this is probably the very best. It's Words of Love. It's a great old Buddy Holly song. But what's so great about the Beatles version, and this is a case where I think the Beatles version actually does exceed the original, and that's those harmonies from John and Paul. They're really, really amazing how their voices sound together. It's just sublime is the word for it. It's absolutely gorgeous. I love that song. Sometimes I'll just get in the mood for it and listen to it, 4 or 5 times in a row. It's just so amazing. Next up, we got another cover, and this time it's Carl Perkins, Honey Don't. It's a great Carl Perkins song. This cover version is good. Historically, John had sung this song, and if you listen to some of their BBC recordings, you can hear him singing that. I prefer the version with John on vocals, but when it came time to do the album, they realized Ringo needed a song, so they gave him this one to sing. Ringo does a fine job, and he's continued to do it over the years. I do like Ringo singing it. I think John sings it better. That's no huge shock, but it's a good song and a nice nice insertion into the album, but not one of my top favorites on the album. Then we come in with another original. This time it's another Paul song, and the fact that we've had so few Paul songs, it really shows at this point John is very much still the dominant force in the band in terms of the songwriting. But Paul brings us a very good song with Every Little Thing, and of course what's a little unusual about this, even though Paul did write the song, John's voice is very prominent in it. It seems they're singing in unison on the verses, but John's voice is a bit overpowering over Paul, and then as they get to the chorus, Paul takes the high harmony as usual, and so throughout the song it really sounds like a John lead throughout, even though it was a Paul written song and they are singing together throughout. But it's got a really infectious melody. It's really catchy, and I like singing along with this one a lot too. The lyrics, again, a little more emotional depth kind of showing through on the lyrics. Nothing like huge and majorly deep, but kind of showing a little bit more progression in their thought on the lyrics, I think. I always liked, I remember the first time I was lonely without her, can't stop thinking about her now. Just, this sort of more, a little more depth of feeling and a little more, perhaps really what I'm looking forward to here to say is it feels a little more sincere, perhaps, than some of their early ones, even though the lyrics aren't necessarily sophisticated. Maybe there's a little more depth of sincerity involved in this one. which I really like. Another great song on there. Then we come with I Don't Want to Spoil the Party, another John Lennon song with some downbeat lyrics, continuing the theme on this album. Yeah, so John is, again, he's being stood up again. He's at this party. He wants to see this girl. She's not there. And so rather than bring the party down with his misery, he leaves the party. So it's, John doesn't sound like he was a very happy person around this time if you listen to these songs, other than 8 days a week. But it really gives the album a sense of cohesiveness in terms of the originals. Of course, it gets a little broken up because we've got these various cover songs throughout, but we can kind of see where they are personally through this, or see at least where John was. So it's a good song. It's not one of my absolute favorites, but a good song. Then we've got What You're Doing. This is a fine song. Again, it's not one of my favorites, but it's good. It's got a nice little melody to it, again, as you'd expect from Paul. The most interesting thing about this song is the rhyming scheme, how he kind of, he rhymes one line with the next line, but it continues on like with another word or two after that. So it's things like, look what you're doing, I'm feeling blue and lonely. So doing and blue and rhyme, but it's blue and lonely. So I think that's kind of clever in terms of the rhyming scheme, but it's not, it's not one of the all-time greatest songs. It's a good song, fine to listen to, but not one of the best. But we close the album out strong with another great cover, and this time it's George's turn to sing a Carl Perkins song. Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby. It may be my favorite of the Beatles' Carl Perkins covers. I really like this one a lot, and I like how George sings it. It's Carl Perkins' original lyrics on this are a lot of fun. They always kind of make me smile. It's a very kind of lighthearted song, and the Beatles perform it very well. So overall, I'd give side 1 the edge over side 2. I think it's got the stronger original material. It's got some good covers. Mr. Moonlight's kind of the only kind of bump in the road really for me on side 1. Side 2 is enjoyable. There's not a bad song on it, but other than 8 days a week, it doesn't hit the heights that side 1 does. So overall, it's a strong album. In terms of rating against their catalog, of course, they did other albums that were a lot better. For me, it's near the middle of the pack, just sort of, near the top of the second half of their catalog, I would say. I put off buying this one for a while when I was first getting into the Beatles. I started buying their albums, and as I was looking through trying to decide which one to buy next, I would look at this one, and I remember several times picking it up and looking at the track list. And at that time, I don't know if I really knew much of anything. Well, as far as their originals, I didn't know any of them other than 8 days a week. And I would, say, well, maybe I'll get something else instead, But then when I finally got it, I really did enjoy it more than I thought. And then over time, it has really grown on me. It's a very strong album. They would go on to hit greater heights, and it doesn't hit the level that their previous album, A Hard Day's Night, did, but still an album that I like to break out and listen to periodically. And every time I do, I'm always thinking, this is even better than I remember it being. So it's a great album. Give it another listen and let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching.